Hey guys, it's Summer Rayne from Homestead, Brooklyn, and I have an exciting episode planned for you today because I am here in beautiful Miami, Florida, and we're gonna go behind the scenes at the Fairchild Botanic Gardens, not only to see what's growing in their tropical glass houses, but also to see what's growing in their private nursery collections. So stay tuned to this week's episode of Plant One on Me, Field Trip Edition.
Okay, my name's Chad Husby. I'm Botanical Horticulturist here at Fairchild Tropical Botanic Garden.
And what does Botanical Horticulturist mean in the context of the garden?
Well, it's mainly a distinction that's made in the United Kingdom, actually, between amenity horticulturists who kind of deal with horticulture in commercial settings and whatnot, and then they have people who work in botanic gardens who work with plant collections and rare plants and plants that are used for science, and they call them botanical horticulturists, who kind of are between horticulture and botany.
And tell me a little bit about the history of the Fairchild Botanic Gardens.
Fairchild Garden has an interesting history. It goes back to the 1930s, and first there was a fellow named Robert Montgomery who was a very successful self-taught accountant and tax lawyer who had a lot of money. He came from Connecticut, and he was really into trees. That was his hobby. He started a big collection of conifers in Connecticut, and then he got tired of winters in the Northeast, and he bought a winter home here in Florida. And one of his friends, George Brett of Macmillan Publishing, challenged him to start collecting palms because they had a friendly little competition going with conifers. And so he came down here, started a palm collection in 1932. And then he later got land that was for a public garden because so many people were coming to his collection and were interested in his collection. He thought there needed to be a public garden here. So he bought the first land for Fairchild Garden and got his friends together to establish it further and named it after the famous plant explorer David Fairchild, who lived in Miami, and his books had really inspired Robert Montgomery about tropical plants. So it was dedicated in Dr. Fairchild's honor.
Well, it sounds like you know a little bit of the history, and I guess when you come to a place like this, you get imbued within the history of the Botanic Gardens.
Oh, most definitely. This place, that was one of the real great attractions of the gardens down here, is they have this fascinating history because South Florida has been this little corner of the tropics for the United States, and so it's attracted all kinds of fascinating people to come here and just explore the ability to grow all these plants outdoors and bring them into the country. And David Fairchild brought over 70,000 plants in during his career with the United States Department of Agriculture and during his retirement. And he was, just the excitement of it all was really amazing.
Well, being from the Northeast and not really a Southern girl myself, I come here and I stand in awe with all the really tropical plants kind of growing that are not native to Florida, growing out in people's yards or in lawnscapes or anything along those lines. Has there ever been an issue where there's like escapees, like tropical escapees? Is that something to be concerned about here?
Oh yes. There have been a few cases of plants that have escaped and behaved badly. There are many plants that escape and just they're there. They don't really do any harm or anything. They propagate on their own. But a few, like the Brazilian pepper and melaleuca and a few others, have been a problem ecologically. But considering the thousands and thousands, actually tens of thousands of plants that have been brought in, it's a very small risk for any given plant. Most plants are a challenge to grow actually here. So.
And what does a typical day or a typical week look like for you on the job?
Well, I do a lot of things each day. Usually I spend part of the day in the nursery at our garden where all the new plant introductions come from. That's a big part of my job, is introducing new plants to the garden. And so we travel a lot, and so have to make sure they're all happy. And I also do office work, working with some scientific research and correspondence. And I have student interns that I meet with every week and that we work on different propagation projects. And we're planting a lot of new plants since the hurricane, especially to replace our plantings. So every Monday we have a planting Monday, and we're planting new things. And I meet with visiting scientists often who come here from all over the world. So there are very few typical days.
So I guess, one of my questions was, how do you determine what plants get chosen for the garden? But I guess like some of that maybe has changed because when Irma hit, you might have lost some items. I'm guessing that you said, "Oh, I need to replace this." But on a typical tropical storm day, how do you decide which plants you bring in? Because there's just so many to choose from.
No, that's absolutely the case. There's a vast world of plants to choose from that haven't been introduced into horticulture and haven't been tried. And so a lot of it we just kind of have to use intuition. When we go overseas, we're not exactly sure what we're going to find in the plant markets there or in the wild, and so it's just kind of more based on our general knowledge of what our environment is like here, what our constraints are, and what we think might be promising, or what things we know already are in cultivation versus what we think might be an exciting new thing that would fill a gap or be useful just for science or just for our educational programs as well.
What role does conservation play, or conservation of plants, at Fairchild?
We do a lot of work with conservation in various dimensions. We have a program that works with Florida natives. We have a number of native and Caribbean and Puerto Rican plants that are endangered, and that those are being propagated and monitored in the wild by a couple of our staff members. But we also do a lot of work with other endangered plants from throughout the world that we work on propagating and sharing with our neighboring institutions too. We try to make sure that everything is backed up as much as possible, so when we get these hurricanes and other storms or other unexpected things happen, that we don't lose anything.
Yeah, I think that really makes sense from the standpoint of especially with the conservation of biological species and of plants, trying to get as much ex situ outside of countries in other people's hands and other growers and other botanic gardens' hands in order to be able to spread the wealth, so to speak, or the genetic wealth.
Oh yes, absolutely. There are so many opportunities with plants to conserve them with horticulture, and that's one of the things that drew me to plants long ago, was the fact that you can propagate and share them so easily, which you can't do nearly as easily with animals, and that's why there are actually a lot of plants that, even though due to all the factors that threaten them in the wild, they're extinct in the wild, but they survive in cultivation, and that's reduced as far as the ones that we know are extinct. That's reduced the rate by about 34%, just growing them in botanical institutions or in gardens and whatnot, and so we can do a lot.
Phenomenal number. Well, I think without further ado, let me undo the cameras, and maybe you could take us through a walk through the garden.
Oh, sure, I'd love to do that.
Great.
Well, we should start with a real highlight here is our double coconut palm, which is right here with these gigantic leaves, which produces the world's largest seed, and it's from the Seychelles Islands in the Indian Ocean. And this is a baby. They do get a trunk eventually. We're hoping this one won't make a trunk for a while because it doesn't have a lot of headroom here. But it's highly tropical, so it needs some shelter in here. And the seeds of this palm they can take from 4 to 6 years to develop. And they're famous because they call it the coco de mer, the coconut of the sea, because it was first discovered on a whole other part of the ocean, because they floated there and they thought at first that it came from under the ocean, and but then later they discovered it came from the Seychelles. So it's a pretty magnificent palm.
I think they look like a very firm butt.
Yes, that's true. Yes.
I saw my first one at the Cornell University Horticultural.
Well, I'd like to show you this. There's a fascinating ginger here, Alpinia rugosa, that not only naturally has all this interesting corrugation, that just the way the leaves are kind of pleated and folded, but underneath it's very, very velvety, so it has a wonderful texture to it. And so there's a whole world of gingers. We think of the edible gingers, but the ginger group in the plant kingdom is enormous and has all kinds of colorful and wonderful flowers and leaves, and many others that are also used for cooking, but they're also often used for ornament.
Some of the most beautiful leaves, I feel, are gingers. But you have a lot of prayer plants around here too, I see, which also contend with beautiful leaves.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we have a lot of calatheas of various kinds and other plants in their family, the Marantaceae. And they have tremendous diversity. And this one is a favorite, Calathea mosaica, that has this fascinating pattern in the leaves. That
I'm seeing this just come onto the houseplant market here, although it's been in Europe for a while.
yes, yeah. It's one of those things that's been around, but took a long time to get propagated and appreciated. And that was really David Fairchild's mission in life, was to introduce new plants and get them out to the world, and that's what we're still trying to do here. So it's always gratifying to see them not just be limited to one place or one garden, but to find their way into the rest of the world. For example, this is one plant. This is a very recent planting, so it's not very luxuriant yet, but it's a piper. Yeah, it's in the piper family from Southeast Asia. But it naturally has this pink, this little splattering of pink color in the veins.
Is this a Celebus pepper, or is that what it's called?
It's actually, no, it's related to that, but it's actually, this piper is from Malaysia, and you'll just be walking along the rainforest floor and you'll see these incredibly colored leaves snaking along the ground. It's quite surprising. You don't even think they're natural, their color is so interesting. So.
I see you have some, it looks like you have some Selaginellas and some Peperomia, or what are some of these?
Yes, we have a lot of, this is
like
a lot
the little ones that people often overlook.
A lot of Selaginella here, which is one of my favorites, and we'll see some more of those later. This is a little Pilea, actually.
Oh, it's a little Pilea.
Yeah, that's got very dark
totally
leaves.
Fooled me.
And under some, depending on what light it's growing in, the leaves can go almost entirely black.
Wow.
But yeah, it does look a lot like a peperomia.
And then what is this one over here? This little, not fern-like creature, but you know what I'm saying.
This here?
Yeah, this one.
Oh yeah, this is a Selaginella. And
it is a Selaginella.
Actually, not sure what species it is,
it's
which is
stunning.
the case with most Selaginellas, because there are about 700 to 800 of them in the world, and they're very hard to identify.
Yeah, and then that's a maidenhair before down there.
Yeah, that's a maidenhair, which they love the limestone. We have a lot of limestone in South Florida, and so maidenhairs love limestone, so they just come up from spore all over the limestone, and that's why they're covering the walls here. And I need to talk about this wonderful Selaginella, which Selaginella sericea, that comes from Ecuador. And this was brought in by the Atlanta Botanical Garden long ago, and we've propagated it and planted it here. And they found two forms of it, a green form and this beautiful, really dark form. Pretty amazing. And this is one of our famous residents here. This is a palm from Southeast Asia, Selaca magnifica, that's a bit dangerous because it has all these spines, and we're actually propagating offsets of it here because we need to move it because it's too close to the path.
I was going to say, I mean, you kind of like maybe your guests to rub up against that. It's really, really getting into the path right there.
It's very, it's very well defended.
This one's, what is this, a schista, what is it called?
Schismatoglottis.
Schismato, yeah.
Yep, that was one we brought back from the markets in Thailand also.
And then you have some gloriosums over here, it looks like.
Yes. And you aerides very well.
It's also become quite popular in the houseplant market.
One of the things is the sealing wax palm, Certostachys renda, which is a famous tropical palm that's a little too cold sensitive for South Florida, so we tend to grow them in here. When people grow them outdoors, they have them in pots and bring them indoors when we have a cold night. I have one of our wonderful new palm introductions here.
Is that a new leaf coming in? That's
that's the new leaf
red?
there. Yeah, one of our Panangas as well.
Aspleniums right here.
And these are some of the new varieties of aspleniums that have been coming from Thailand. We've got 3 different of the wavy leaf types, which are quite exciting. And we have some unusual flowers here appearing. This is a relative of chocolate here.
Yeah, look at that.
Herenia, and it makes little pods just like chocolate, but it's Doesn't taste like chocolate.
What does it taste like?
I actually haven't, nobody eats them, so I assume they're not too good.
Oh, they might be really bitter.
Yeah, they probably are. Yeah.
Either that or they'll lay you flat out for like a week.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'd like to mention this is an interesting type of plant. They're called cyclanths. They're related to what's called the Panama hat palm, which are not palms. They're actually more related to pandanus, the big, this big group in Southeast Asia. But these are from the Americas, and they're a whole group that's very little known or appreciated. But they have kind of a lot of the ornamental characteristics of palms. And we've got a couple of different. This is another type here, the Ludovia. And right behind it is a very interesting cycad. It's Ceratozamia urifolidia that looks like sort of like a giant maidenhair.
Yeah, it looks like it's gotten a little bit of growth hormone.
Yes, definitely. Actually, the aroid on the wall there is kind of an interesting one. It's a Rhaphidophora cryptantha.
Mine is so much smaller in my house.
And it could be that yours is actually a descendant of this one, because this one came to Fairchild in the 1970s from a botanic garden in New Guinea. And it turned out it was an undescribed species at that time. And it was the conservatory manager at that time, Craig Allen, who's actually come back to visit for the Aroid show, who in the 90s he discovered that this was flowering, that nobody had noticed because the flowers are hidden in the leaves. That's where the name cryptantha, like cryptic, comes from. And he sent photos and material to Dr. Peter Boyce, the expert on Asian aroids, who realized it hadn't been described. And so it was described from this exact clone that we have here growing at Fairchild. So sometimes horticulture and beauty meshes with botany, and we get interesting new discoveries in botanic gardens. Actually, this is something that's about to be planted. I know it's very dark back here. But
It's okay, my camera adjusts.
okay, good. This is an Angiopteris, which are the mulefoot ferns, but most Angiopteris have fronds, have leaves that are divided several times. This one is unique in that it's only divided once, so it looks a lot like a cycad. And it's a super rare one that was thanks to a plant collector here in South Florida who found it in the 90s. And it's something you can't even find easily in Southeast Asia, so we're very happy.
How do you divide it? Is it division, like rhizomes, or?
It makes little offsets. In fact, I don't know if this one doesn't have an offset on it right now, but yeah, it makes little fernlets around it. And you can actually take the leaf bases off, and they each have a bud on them. They call them auricles, and you can grow those to propagate it. So this is another very interesting residence of the garden. This is a relative of the sealing wax palm, but this was the form called the Teddy Buehler palm that's got this kind of rainbow striping on its trunk. So that's a very rare and coveted form.
It does look like bamboo.
But yes, it does. And both palms and bamboos are distantly related, so they're all in the monocot group, and many palms and bamboos kind of imitate each other. So yeah. Back where we started, but this is a relative of the Aralias. It's an osmoxylon, and one of the interesting things on it is the base of the petioles have these really prominent ridges. They're interesting. This is Osmoxylon novogenense from New Guinea, and it produces really magnificent inflorescences when it flowers. So we brought this back from a botanic garden in Hawaii. Yeah, we have quite a community of plant people down there. That's great. Colorful cast of characters. So this is one of our collections greenhouses here, where we store a lot of the precious new introductions and whatnot. This part is actually conservation. These are South Florida native cactus and ferns, so a lot of cacti and succulents there. So they're mostly native to the Keys and other areas of South Florida. And then we do One of our staff members is very active on South Florida and Caribbean fern conservation. So these are all grown from spores that were collected from many rare ferns. And then the rest is all kinds of collections from all over the world that we have brought in that will be planted in the garden and propagated, shared with other gardens, studied. So there are all kinds of things of all different purposes here. And for example, this one is a Benstonia species. It's related to the pandanus, but it's the first time I believe this genus has ever been grown in the Americas. So we brought this from Singapore Botanic Garden. Teeth all along the leaves, and it gets a nice kind of silvery blush on the leaves. Some other interesting leaf color. This is one we brought back from Taiwan 2 years ago. It's famous for the gold color of the leaves, the undersides of the leaves, and Neolitzia. And this specific, there's just one genetic individual that has this gold color. They normally have silver, and they actually use these leaves even to make different arrangements, because when they dry, the gold stays just as nice as ever. So unfortunately it's very slow growing, but we have 5 of them and we're babying them along. So, and this is another kind of striking plants here. This is a ficus that has really deep purple leaf undersides. I don't know of any other species of ficus that has a lot of leaf color like this.
I would have not guessed that that was a ficus.
It does nevertheless have these little figs on it, but it's quite dramatic, and it actually also doesn't become a tree. It just sprawls along the ground, so it would make a great hanging basket plant. It would probably make a great house plant actually. And these are some very silvery ferns from Mexico that are growing here.
Look at this metallic sheen.
Yes. This is
Come on now.
This is a fern, Microsorium thailandicum from Thailand, not surprisingly. It's famous for its iridescent color.
That is like, I mean,
under the right
video
circumstances.
class are probably off the hook with that.
And have to highlight this. This is a new introduction from our Thailand trip this time. It's Selaginella picta.
That is stunning.
That guess we could show some of our new introductions down here. Very excited about this that we found. It's a miniature fig that we brought back from Thailand.
Cool.
It's a natural bonsai.
It is a natural bonsai.
And there were only 4 of these in the King's Plant sale we went to, and when I saw them, I just immediately bought all of them.
I mean, but that like begs the question then too, because you go to Thailand with these plants. How do you know you're not taking the last one? You know, these people are like putting them on the side of the road. Like, you don't, do you? Is it hard?
Well, it's usually they've got much better about taking things out of the wild. Generally, things there have been propagated, and you can tell that they're all kind of nicely presented and propagated. So, but the thing is that they also, once just a few plants get into Thailand, they propagate them in large numbers. They always are finding ways to do it, and so very, very seldom is anything really the last one there, because they find a way to make more. We're going to be building a new greenhouse, so and this is another iridescent fern. It's not as iridescent at the moment, but this is Microsorium siamense, also a Thailand native plant.
Oh yeah, there's your Aglaonema picta tricolor right there.
Yes, indeed. We've got that.
Popular one.
These are some of the ant ferns, Lechinopterus from Southeast Asia, that have those great caudics.
Is that a Labicea?
Yeah, these are Labicias. Yeah.
They actually grow well as indoor house plants.
Oh, excellent.
Oh, what's this one?
Which one? Yeah, sure. Check what this one is. Yeah, this one. Yeah, they're saying cordifolium, Anthurium cordifolium.
I think I've seen anything like that.
Yeah, that is in Ardisia, and we have even better specimens over here that from Southeast Asia, and there's a lot of spectacular understory ones with really dark leaves.
Really nice.
And we have one that one's a little chlorotic, but this one here that's almost black. But I wanted to mention this one.
Oh,
Yeah, like this is the Ardisia that in Southeast Asia. It's quite amazing. Can't miss this. The Costus venosus from Panama.
You know what it looks like? To me, it looks like a very large, overgrown Tradescantia.
Yes, it does. It does look like that. Yeah, it's much more succulent than most Costus are, but it's famous for the lower stems which hold water.
I kind of feel like you need a little bit more space in the cultivation house.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
We're building a new greenhouse this year.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely. And we're building a new propagation house. So because we're sharing this is part of what's called the Million Orchid Project that Fairchild's doing to restore orchids, native orchids to the trees of Miami.
So you said these are all native orchids?
Yeah, these are all native orchids that are being grown from seed and being planted out among the trees of the different districts of Miami. And so it's become because...
Do you have native bromeliads down here and everything too?
Yeah, we have, Florida has about 16 native bromeliad species. So,
16?
yeah. Quite diverse, mostly Tillandsias, but also other genera.
Hey guys, hopefully you really enjoyed that behind the scenes look at Fairchild Botanic Gardens. I mean, they have some really great specimens growing even after Hurricane Irma. So hopefully you enjoyed that episode, and of course, if you're loving everything that you're seeing, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and if you could also follow along at Homestead Brooklyn on Instagram and on my website at homesteadbrooklyn.com. Ciao!
And true plant people, their eyes are always bigger than their stomach, right?
You said that one right.